Hi, I'm Christina Barker, licensed clinical professional counselor, love and life coach. And today we're going to be talking about an issue that actually is applicable to almost everyone in the world. If you're a living, breathing soul who has to interact with people and live in an imperfect environment, right? This topic is radical acceptance. And just like the title or the term itself, it is learning how to accept reality for what it is. And the radical aspect of it is accepting it fully, just as it is. Here, let's get into it. A lot of times, the reason that we experience distress, upset, anxiety, even depression, problems in our relationships, problems on the job, problems in our community, in our homes, is because we don't like to be uncomfortable and we don't like for things to go wrong. The truth is, we live in a world where things are imperfect. Life's gonna happen. C'est la vie, right? It's life. And if we don't learn that we have to basically make peace with life as it is in order to maintain a sense of euthemic, stability where we feel, even in the absence of things being perfect, we're content, we'll literally be miserable. We will be feeding our own misery. Some of the happiest, most well adjusted people who are able to really regulate their emotions and take life as it comes and carpe diem, seize the day, are people who understand life's going to happen. It is what it is. We may as well accept it and make peace with it and make the most of it, just as it is. That doesn't exactly mean that we don't acknowledge that things are painful or we don't acknowledge that things are different from the way they should be or that we want them to be. But the word should itself is actually, it works against this concept of radical acceptance because the word should tells us and kind of sets up in our mind this construct that says this is the standard and anything that is off from the standard is unacceptable. And so when we get into a place of believing that problems and situations that we're faced with, imperfections, issues, challenges are unacceptable, what we end up doing is we end up fighting reality, refusing to accept them as they are. And so radical acceptance simply says learn to accept problems as they are, not because you like them, not because you are someone who's just desensitized and you don't get upset about anything, but just because from a place of wisdom. And this is our wise mind speaking. The wise mind balances the emotional and the logical or rational, puts those together, and comes up with a wise way to approach life. Our wise mind tells us that we have to accept things as they are because that's the way they are. And not accepting them doesn't change anything. So, radical acceptance, I'll give you a few really quick pointers. It's letting go of what we can't control, it's accepting things as they are. Radically, meaning fully, not holding on to bitterness and resentment as I choose to move on anyway, but even letting go of the bitterness and resentment about the way they are because we accept that this is just how it is, right? And it's accepting it without judgment or forcing it to be anything other in this moment than what it actually is. The best analogy that I've actually read and seen it used for how to practice it, radical acceptance, or how it looks in reality, is I want you to picture that you're on your way to work, but you're running a little late. And so you have it in your mind that you can still make it on time. And so you get into your car and everything's going right, and then you get to a red light. And this happens to be a red light that is a pretty long red light. It's not just the 60 seconds to 90 seconds light, it's like a 4-minute light. You're getting even more angry, even more upset because now you are realizing that what you want is getting further and further away from you being able to actualize it. Then you get going and you think maybe if I step on it a little further, a little harder, I can get there a little faster. I can make up the 4 minutes I lost. And then you get to another light. Now, by now, if you haven't developed the skill or the ability to radically accept things as they are, you're possibly going to end up a nervous wreck and or a road rager, where now you're rushing the people who are walking across the street at the lights, and you're honking your horn, and you're cussing and fussing at the people who are basically interfering with your objective that you have in mind of making up the lost time and getting to work at a reasonably close to on time pace. Here's the thing. Radical acceptance says, this is unfortunate. I am not happy about being late, but I also realize I am late. There's absolutely not much I can do about that. And so while I'm not going to just slow down and mosey my way on in as if I'm nonchalant, I'm still going to move with urgency and be intentional, but I also refuse to rage, to fuss and cuss people out, to get angry with things that I can't change, like pedestrians walking at their normal pace as they cross the street as I'm trying to get through a stop sign. I'm going to accept that being late might just be what I end up having to be. And on top of accepting it, I'm going to accept any consequences that may come with being late. I may not like the fact that I have consequences. It literally could be I could lose a job. I could lose a position. It may be an interview and they may misunderstand and assume that I'm not a reliable person. But there's nothing in this moment that I can do to change that reality. And so instead of rejecting it and working myself up into a rage or a nervous wreck, I'm going to accept reality as it is. How would this look if we stopped fighting all the things in our life that are as they are and we simply accept it? Not because we like it or it's the way we want it to be or it quote unquote should be, but because it is what it is. I have an ear infection. I don't have an ear infection, but hypothetically speaking, I have an ear infection. I'm in pain. I'm uncomfortable. Does that ear infection have to mean that I then turn it into a miserable experience? Or can I deal with the pain as it is, accepting that as I take my antibiotics and I take my pain reliever, it's eventually going to be addressed. But in this moment, I'm uncomfortable with it. I accept even being uncomfortable. That's radical acceptance as I work towards relieving my discomfort. Here's the thing. One of the most important things to remember about radical acceptance is that we can't avoid problems in our life. We just can't. And so the problems represent pain, pain in our life. Pain is any interference from the comfort that we seek and desire, right? It can be physical pain. The ear infection makes my ear hurt. It can be emotional pain. Someone I love just passed away or moved out of town. It can be mental pain. I'm really overwhelmed and stressed at work, or I'm trying really hard to figure out a problem and how to resolve it. We can experience all sorts of pain, and pain is not avoidable. But the problem comes when we turn our pain into suffering. The difference between pain and suffering is that pain is a matter of fact, unpleasant experience that we have to go through. Suffering is what we choose to do with our pain. If we choose to accept it and deal with it as it stays just pain that is being dealt with. But if we choose to work ourselves up into an angry, nervous, anxious, upset, raging fit about the pain, then now we have pain and suffering. So my question and my challenge to you is, why suffer any more than you have to? This concept is really a spin-off or an addendum to the notion of the serenity prayer. The serenity prayer says, Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Serenity is peace. God, give me peace with accepting things for what they are, not because they're acceptable, not because they're enjoyable, not because we are indifferent or in some way, minimizing or desensitized to the pain of it, but because they are as they are. I can accept that I am having trouble in my marriage. I can accept that my money is not enough to pay my bills. I can accept that my child is not doing well in school. I can accept that I just received a diagnosis that is terminal. I don't have to turn my accepting the pain into I don't have to turn the pain that I'm experiencing into misery. I can accept it and choose to make peace with it. A beautiful illustration of this is the movie, that the Titanic movie. I remember when everyone was rushing around, frantically trying to vie for the last few seats on the boats that would hopefully hold on to them until some rescue could be launched. And I remember that they were designating the boats according to class. And there were people who got on the boats early. There were others who were scrambling, trying to get onto a boat, trying to fit onto a boat, even jumped off of the ship onto boats, trying to frantically resolve their situation. And then there was the band. The band realized they felt at the bottom of the totem pole, and they decided, we're probably going to sink and die. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that in that moment where it's life and death, that I wouldn't have been frantically trying to survive, but I think that they illustrated a radical acceptance of the reality that they were going to die in that moment. And they just began to play music. They played music until they could play no more. What if, in the midst of the problems you're facing, after you've realized that you've either done all you can or there's not much more you can do without making a bad situation worse, if you just made peace with it, if you just accepted it for what it is? What if? How would that change how miserable you feel in your marriage? How would that change how miserable you feel on your job? How would that change how miserable you feel in your relationships with your family and friends? How would that change how miserable you feel about your life in general? I like to encourage you to end your misery, end your suffering, accept the problems that you have, face them head on from a place of peace and radical acceptance, calm and rational decision making. Choose to do the good you know to do and can do, and choose to accept that there's certain things you won't be able to do. You have certain boundaries and limitations, and they are what they are. I pray this has helped you. I'd love to hear in the comments if this was helpful. What came to mind for you? How are you going to apply this concept of radical acceptance as you go forward? God bless you. Take good care.